SquatchDtv, they're on the case. Steve and Chris, no mystery they can't face. Busting hoaxes, exposing lies. They're the champs of the Bigfoot mystery. Bringing truth, science, and clarity. Squatch-D-TV, they're the real deal. Uncovering the truth, it's time to reveal. Squatch-D-TV, take us on your quest. Find the legend, put the rumors to rest. Late at night, shadows creeping. Deep in the woods, secrets lay sleeping. Ooh yeah. Squatch-D-TV, they're on the case. Steve and Chris, no mystery they can't face. Busting hoaxes, exposing lies. They're the champs of the Bigfoot mystery. Bringing truth, science, and clarity. Squatch-D-TV, they're the real deal. Uncovering the truth, it's time to reveal.
Welcome to Squatch-D TV, where the truth is first before all else. Join your hosts, veteran investigator, TV personality, and author Steve Kulls, and from the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Project and the Kentucky Fried Fixes channel, Chris Bennett. Sit back and prepare to take yourself on a journey with the longest-running Bigfoot podcast, Squatch-D TV. Here are your hosts, Steve and Chris.
And good evening, cyberspace. Welcome to Squatch-D TV for today's date, August 25th, 2024. I'm your host, your guide, the Squatch Detective Steve Kulls, along with my co-host right down there, Mr. Chris Bennett. How are you, Chris?
Good to see you, Steve. Man, I'm doing good. A little tired, but we're getting through. Before I go any further, I want to say early happy birthday to my youngest son, Andy. He's going to be 20 years old tomorrow.
Wow.
So, happy birthday, Lord. Andy. We love you, buddy. And it's a shame that tonight's his last night as a teenager, and he's spending it at home. What a shame. But that's the way it goes. You know, one day you turn 13, and then it seems like a week later you're 20. And,
good Lord. I remember him when he was...
Yeah.
That is
right.
Awesome. Well, you wish him a happy birthday for me.
Yeah, I think he was about 2 or 3 years old. Yeah, when we met, something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
But oh well, how's things been going for Mr. Kulls? You been doing all right, bud? How about that neck? Is it still kicking, or is it
still kicking? Still kicking.
Yeah.
You know, the tough thing is falling asleep and getting up, because a lot of times the sleep pattern, I'll wake up sometimes and my arm will be numb, and I'll have some pain, that radiates down to both shoulders. Like I said, the mainstay of the pain has always been in this part of the neck, but it's been lately it's there, but it's almost nil, and that's not too bad considering that I had the shot over 2 weeks ago. So that's
hard to find a good position to sleep, and don't waste your money on them magic pillows and stuff.
No.
They don't work.
The good news is that I'm going to have a surgical procedure done the beginning of the second week of September, just before the Pennsylvania Bigfoot gaggle.
Yeah.
And, it's a same day surgery. I'll be walking out. And so it's not a fix. It's a Band-Aid over the issue. The Band-Aid is the major issue is the pain. The secondary issue is, the numbness and, vertigo and stuff like that may or may not occur. So
weird stuff with you when it starts putting pressure on nerves, man. Weird stuff.
Boris asked to see the office assistant, and unfortunately, the office assistant is not in the office tonight. He is off pandering to his mother, asking for treats.
Yeah.
So, but if everybody ever is wondering what since we have that question, I'm going to pull this up real fast. Since everybody is wondering, exactly who is the office assistant. And let's see if I can't get one of his more character poses for us. Because he is quite the character. And I don't know why on this folder I do not have any more of his reasons. But see if we can't pull this one up. Oh, hang on. There we go. We'll show these two. So I'll show you guys the office assistants since you asked about it. I'll show you the Pete H. Thank you so much. Wow. Look. Oh, and thank you, Walter, as well.
Walter, my goodness. Walter Kroll, gifted 5 memberships. Thank you, Walter.
So this is the office assistant with his German Shepherd sister, Hope. So there they are. And
the office assistant is on the left, by the way.
That is correct. So
Watson and Hope.
Yep, Watson and Hope. That's them. So yep, those are my newest kids. So
well, we better do a roll call tonight. I know
we certainly we've been so busy with other stuff. And first of all, let's throw this out there. Thank you, Robert Sayer, for joining the membership. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Walter, as always, thank you so much, sir. Gifting Walter, 5 memberships. And Pete H., thank you again, brother, for becoming a member. And for those that are wondering what we have in the membership is the latest video I cut was where I did my Hocking Hills lecture. So it's my Hocking Hills presentation on the latest one.
Plus,
an hour long.
You get like a 1-day preview of the videos before they go on the channel too, right, Steve?
A long form video. Sometimes we can't, obviously, but unless there's something really breaking news that we have to get out there quick. Normally, if I do a video, like I said, I am in the works of another membership video. I'm gonna be probably filming that over the next couple of days. I gotta see what man chores I have to do tomorrow because
honeydews.
Let's get to the roll call, and I see we got a lot of new names. And again, well, to all the new subscribers, thank you for joining us. Sit back, relax, kick your feet up, make yourself at home, grab yourself some popcorn, your favorite beverage, adult or otherwise. And, we're here to have a real good time. So, and today we got quite the show, and we'll explain that in a second. But let's go to the roll call. First in again was Robert Sayer. Mick Siphon is in the house. Pat Collins. Hello, Pat. Relic Tomlin stopped by and said hello. He's going to catch us on the flip because he's over the pond.
Catch you on the replay, bud. Thank you for dropping in.
Here's a new name, Straw Dog 1.
Welcome, Straw Dog.
Sir. Welcome. Walter Kroll, again, thank you for putting that. Ammon Chris.
What a man.
Good evening, sir. Daniel Weeks, good to see you. Don Gummel, hey, how you doing, brother? Larry Sharp, what's going on?
Larry.
30 Woods, what's happening? Sandra Piper, hello. Karen Fisher, new name. Good evening from Ohio. She says, well, I love Ohio. So great place. And hopefully I'll be out there sooner than later again. Pete H, of course, in the house. Thank you again for becoming a member. Angel Nolan, what's going on? Little Kilroy was here.
Little Kilroy.
Kaiju Ninja 1985. Hello, Kaiju. Good to see you, Gary Johnson Sr. Oh, there's the bouncer, Jen. Hello, Jen. What's going on? Jen. I'll be seeing you just in a couple of weeks, along with finding the trackway. And by the way, he's lurking around in the chat room too. Tennessee Cherokee. Good to see you, sir.
Cherokee, welcome.
Nikki, Sasquatch Secrets with the typo. Of course, we two shaved that one, didn't we, Nikki? Boris Khan, Gorny Goo.
Boris.
Good to see you. Mrs. Trackway is in the house. Dun, dun, dun.
Trackway, welcome.
Welcome.
Keep an eye on him.
Let's see. Helton, a.k.a. Fast Man. Chris, what's going on, brother? Good to see you in chat tonight. Robert Denduven, good to see you.
Robert, I'm
And
lost.
we're getting towards the end here. Ristel, good to see you, Ristel.
Crystal, welcome.
Jeff D. Smith, welcome. Arthur
D.
Watch, hello. Kathy Zabrowski, we've been seeing you lately too. Welcome. Welcome back. Mike Stetton, good to see you, my friend.
Mike.
The Beatron. We haven't seen him in a while. We're in the chat. He's probably, like I said, you guys are watching the show and just making it live every once in a while is great and saying hello. So hello to you, the Beatron. Good to see you.
Yeah, welcome.
The Great Awakening, who got one of the gift memberships. Well, welcome, the Great Awakening. Good to see you. And welcome to the channel. Who else? Jay Fritz. There he is. Jay Fritz in the house.
Yeah, I'm trying, but I'm lost, man. I got lost about halfway.
I'm getting there. All right, Jeff. Pine Island Research is in the house. Good to see you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Josh Howard. Hello. That's a new name, I think.
Welcome.
Welcome, sir.
I think we got
Kaiser Soze 88. Hello from Eastern Pennsylvania. Welcome to the channel.
Kaiser Soze. That's one of my favorite movies. I love that.
Nice. Blake Burrows. Good to see you, Blake. He said he made it.
Blake, welcome. Glad to see you, man. I'm glad you got in here.
And like I say, we don't hold it against you guys. You can't make the live shows. We understand life happens.
That's right.
But you know what? The following, there will be a test to make sure you watch the video. Anyway,
I think that's everybody.
That is everybody right now.
If you missed anybody, it's not because we don't love you, and we want to say hello to all the lurkers out there and everybody listening to the podcast.
That's right. Now, well, let me get into a little bit all about this. This is over the many years I've been doing this, and for those who are new to the channel, I've been at this since 1998. And it's been quite a long journey. And when I first got involved, being an investigator, a professional investigator, I wanted to get myself. Oh, grasshopper! Sorry, chop liver. I'm sorry. We owe you one. We'll throw a shout out for you next time twice. How about that?
Grasshopper, we love you, man.
We do. It wasn't on purpose. That's for sure.
Finding the trackway. Look at this.
What? Oh my goodness. Why, thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. You're too kind. You guys
make this channel possible. We really appreciate that. And like I said, you join the membership. If you like it, if you've been gifted a membership and you like what you see and you're enjoying the channel, this is a great way to support the channel. It's only 99 cents a month. We don't have any big contracts or anything to do that. We don't even have a stupid sponsor yet. But the bottom line is that everything we do here is out of our own pockets, and that includes travel and stuff like that. And occasionally we might get an opportunity to sell a few books and, on a shows, but we don't do many shows a year. I do about 4 to 5 a year. Just to let you know, it's like I've done 2 shows this year because one I had to drop out because I was hurt. I actually have done 1 show this year, and I had to drop out of one because that was very early on when I got hurt. But like I said, we don't do many now. I'm doing 3 in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I think I got one in October now that I just got asked to do that I've done in the past, and they called us up. And so anyway, I'm babbling. So let's get back to what I was saying. So I started this back in 1998. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a solid footing on the ground when I got rolling. And one of those things was trying to find. Oh, is my mic low tonight?
It sounds okay to me. If you want to turn up a little volume, though, it wouldn't bother me.
My mic has been funny. This computer's been doing a little. All right, that may be a little bit better. So, yeah, I can't hear the difference here, so I don't know.
It sounds okay to me.
Okay, so I just turned it up a little bit.
Oh, am I too loud?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Well, I've not done anything with the microphone. If it's done something on its own, we'll have to get in there and
And
whip it back in shape.
for those who've gotten into this field in the 2000s, or even the mid 2000s or the 2010s, or even the 2020s, the 90s was kind of a renaissance era for Sasquatch research. There was a lot of data being collected at that time. There was the John Green database. There were many doctors, Dr. Leroy Fish, Dr. John Bindernagel, of course, Dr. Wolf-Henner Fahrenbach, who's since retired from the field many years ago. Obviously, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. You had Dr. Krantz for a spell. And, John Moynizinski.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, John Moynizinski, Cappy Strain. So you had all these folks here, and there was a few others that were really veteran researchers. The late Tim Cullen, who passed away probably almost 20 years ago by now. And a lot of these guys put together a lot of researched data and information. And a lot of this today, we're looking at the work of Dr. Wolf-Henner Fahrenbach. And he ran a group called the Oregon Primate Institute up in Oregon. Actually had obtained hair samples that tested positive for primate, lacked the medulla, all that fun stuff. And in case you're wondering, the medulla is that it's like the core of a hair follicle. Well, strangely, they found that the medulla was not present in this hair follicle, so they never tested it. Never did get anything. And Jeff, Robert W. Morgan was not in my circles back then. And yes, thank you, Grass, for reminding me. Is that
he was in some documentaries in the 70s?
Yes, correct. And in case people don't know, Henry Franzoni was another big researcher in the 90s at the time. He just passed away a couple of days ago.
Oh.
So our condolences to Mr. Franzoni's family and friends. And I forgot completely about that because, like I said, I've been running around all day today. But
Robert Morgan was still making the rounds during the Blog Talk days.
Yes, he was. Yep, absolutely.
Shows there.
Yep. So a lot of the stuff, when I hit the ground rolling, we had a lot of stats. We knew a lot about Sasquatch statistics, given the volume of data and how it was collected, how it was assembled by a scientist who assembles statistics. So that is rather a huge thing. So we're going to start off with, first of all, what are indicators of Bigfoot sign? And you're going to get, and trust me, why did I say trust me? I hate using that term. Believe me that, there are very few channels doing this kind of programming out here. So you see a lot of interview stuff. We do interviews, but we do analysis, we do interviews, but a lot of times we like doing education. And this is something that a lot of channels don't do. They actually do a live podcast on education. So indicators of Bigfoot sign. Obviously, footprint suppressions. The most common sign, footprints can reveal details about the creature's size, gait, even anatomical features like dermal ridges or a double ball on the foot. And the text provides detail, and this is Henner Fahrenbach. The text provides detailed criteria for distinguishing potential Bigfoot tracks from those of other animals or humans. Broken treetops. Bigfoot may break treetops to reach insects or other food sources, leaving behind noticeable damage. Browsing on vegetation. The presence of browsed vegetation, particularly nettles, ferns, and berries, can indicate Bigfoot activity in the area. I've discussed that a lot of times in the past, that when you're a tracker, you're looking in not only for tracks, but you're looking for sign that a particular size has moved through. So if I'm trying to track a bear, there's a certain height at which I'm looking for damage in the brush.
Yep.
If it's a deer, again. Now, what I have noticed, and what has been passed around for generations before even me, was that about anywhere from about the 5'8" to 7-foot level, you're going to start seeing this. Now, there's only a couple of animals in the wilderness that really can do that kind of damage consistently, and that would be a moose and potentially an elk because of their height and their antler spread. However, when you're in an area, especially New York, Vermont, that's something you have to keep very keen on as a moose. But because of the weight distribution, these hoofs will leave definitive tracks and marks on the ground.
Right.
So that's another big indicator of, it's something other than a Bigfoot. So again, that's just common basics. This is the basics. Unusual smells. An unusual and offensive smell is sometimes associated with Bigfoot presence through though the text does not elaborate on the specific nature of this smell. Well, in truth, a lot of times the smell is discussed as death, garbage, skunk-like, musk-like, wet dog-like, etc. Garbage is another one. But I will say this, that I have smelled one when we had gotten the Fort Ann cast back in 2006. And in case people are wondering about that, because we have a lot of new viewers here, so I need to elaborate a little bit more. But in 2006, I was out with the team in my research area number 1. And after doing some calls for a little spell and maybe some tree knocks, I forget exactly why. Of course, we were going back almost 20 years ago. We began to smell hit us, this really foul stench of a smell. And now I've been a paramedic for those I was also a paramedic. Not only was I a professional investigator, as a firefighter, paramedic, and a lead singer in a band. So I've done quite a spread of things. But this smelled worse than a dead body. And I've smelled dead bodies that have been around for a couple of weeks in the house. And I was like, whoa. And then we heard some footsteps around us, very close. Basically, where my arm is going into an arc around us. Now, mind you, it's pitch black out. There's trees. We didn't have any night vision equipment. We just had flashlights, but we operate in the dark. We weren't operating with any light source at all. So after the noise settles down, the smell goes away. And, it smelled like musk, wet dog, garbage, death, skunk, all rolled into one. It was horrid. And like I said, it was kind of a breezy night, but that smell hit us. And then it disappeared just like that as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I smelled the decaying body, dead body, and smell it and like a body been decaying in summer heat. It was really rank bad.
Right.
Strong enough to where you felt the need to upchuck. It
right.
initiated a gag reflex.
Right. And Straw Dog says maybe an unusual amount of bones, feathers, etc. in specific areas. Right. But you remember,
yes,
I have found bone piles and skins and stuff like that. But you have to be very careful in looking at the bones. I found a pile of deer bones and there was a deer pelt. And I looked down at the bone right away, and where the joint was, it had been cut. So that was just somebody cleaning a deer.
Right.
So a lot of people will field strip a deer or field strip their kill or their prey and leave it on the ground. So you got to be. So I pulled the pelt up and I found the bullet hole.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, you can look around, Stu. Like I know in Kentucky we have river mussels. And I believe that's one of their food sources. That's just a theory. It's not proven. Right. But, I have found piles of shells. And but you got to be careful because, you look for signs of a campfire. If there's been a fire around somewhere, then that's obviously human related. And any marks on the shells where they've been pried open or, the fire, once you boil those things, they'll open up on their own, once they're boiled. So that's why it's important to look for a campfire.
And then indirect evidence. The text mentions about finding other indirect evidence such as hair, scat, vocalizations, though these are not discussed in detail.
Well, I think let's see. This was Dr. Fehrenbach's.
Correct.
I think maybe the first one up there at the top when he was talking about look for a double ball on the foot. I think
Yep.
that was later debunked as
Right.
in
Correct.
that was the Ray Wallace casts or
Correct.
stompers. Yeah. But this is still good stuff. That was the
Right.
only thing that I saw on there that has been proven to be questionable.
Correct. Yep.
Very good stuff.
Correct. Well, let me replace that double ball with the lack, and we're going to talk a little bit more about tracks in depth
Right.
in a little bit. So,
Yeah, the lack of an arch. Would be.
and we got a couple of new folks there. I saw Matt from Central Florida. Bigfoot wandered in. Hello, Matt, and the Wolf Killer. Hello, Wolf Killer. Good to see you here tonight. That's another new name. Hello, welcome.
Yeah. Good to see you guys.
Okay, so when considering track evidence, and this comes from yet another piece of work, a very smart woman by the name of Barbara Wasson, who was really a good tracker. When considering track evidence, there's certain things we need to look. We need to look at track mechanics, and when you look at a track, it tells you a lot of things. And this is something again. People, like I said, I ended up becoming a tracker. That was one of the goals when I set into this. I have to learn to read the forest, read the ground, read the fauna, read the air, read everything. That's very true. We have Wolf Killer, and guess who just showed up? Brian Wolf. Wait, who wants to kill me?
We're a non-violent crowd here, Brian. Don't worry.
Wolf Killer, thank you so much. Thanks for popping in and commenting. Welcome, sir.
One of our lurkers, and we know you guys are out there. I don't blame you. That's okay.
And we appreciate you as well.
Yeah, sure do.
So, track mechanics include the pressure of ridges, depth and sidewall characteristics of the track. They can reveal information about the creature's size, weight, speed, and gait. Stride and straddle. Stride distance between tracks and the straddle width between the left and right tracks are crucial measurements for identifying and verifying tracks. You got to remember, something is standing is that wide. The feet aren't going to be together.
Right.
The feet are going to be spread out a little bit more. So if you do catch a standing print, and I remember many years ago going to Texas and finding these tracks, and these tracks were fake, because at the very end of the row where the water was, there was it was trying to give the appearance of stopping, and the tracks were sitting there like this. Now, I'm sorry, when you have legs that are this wide, you can't, unless you're pigeon toeing yourself, which the tracks are completely
you're walking
parallel.
like a runway model there. one leg swinging in front of the other.
Comes to mind that great Christmas special, The Nutcracker Suite, especially if you're a male Sasquatch. But anyway, yeah. So it was very clear to me those tracks were hoaxed, and that was and the straddle was what told me that. Aging tracks. The age of tracks can be estimated based on soil type, weather conditions, and the track disintegration. And we see that a lot with snow tracks. Snow tracks have a tendency, whereas tracks in soil and in sand, they tend to erode. Of course, sand, they erode really quickly. Yep. Soil, they erode over time as well. In snow, they don't necessarily erode, but they spread. So, and I've shown in the past, a boot print in the snow that a week later looks like a Sasquatch print because the sun beats down, even though it could be 10 degrees or even 5 below zero, but that sun will start to melt. That direct sunlight will start to melt that track.
That melt will fool you. Yeah.
And that's why you got to look at these tracks a lot of time for ice content. If there's a lot of ice content in a big track, that would be a very big indicator that, especially when it's really cold out, that's a really big indicator that that track has melted down and frozen over.
Right.
So common misidentified Bigfoot tracks, deer tracks, animal bounds in the snow. How many times have I seen snow tracks where people have written, have sent me tracks, and I see them, and what they are actually snow hare tracks, and they're jumping in the snow. Snow melts, it spreads them out a little bit more, and people are going, look at that stride. Look at that stride of that thing. And what it is, it's just a rabbit going.
Right. And most of those, the problem they look for those too, they're in line too.
And of course, combination tracks. One of the biggest track flaws we see is, and I always say this, when you see a track that has a bend to it, right? That's an overstep track. That is usually a bear overstep where one paw comes down, another one it's a quadrupedal trait. So I see a lot of people coming in, look at my tracks, and everyone's got a bend to it, left to the right. That's not a working foot, right? That's not a working foot. And we got to remember that a Sasquatch likely has, as the tracks have indicated over the last number of years, is that they have a mid-tarsal break or a mid-tarsus or mid-flexible foot.
Right. Yeah, there's a aspect of their foot that we don't have.
And again, we've talked about the melted tracks and snow and sand, stuff like that. And sand, especially, because sand, you can put it down and the dispersion rate, since you're dealing with a very loose soil type, sometimes if you skid and walk, it can make that look even bigger as well.
Yeah, you really couldn't tell anything about sand. Oh, man.
Okay. Now here we're looking at some more at Dr. Fehrenbach stuff. Is that the Sasquatch has evolved from a peculiarly long stride with a long arm swing, and we know that from witness accounts. Now, mind you, Henner is a statistician. He's a PhD. He has a statistician. Collected a lot of reports and also took the entirety of John Green's database back in the 90s and put those together. So this was evaluated using over 700 records of Sasquatch encounters, where if you ever noticed, the John Green questionnaire was very detailed, very extremely detailed. So it was used to extrapolate a lot of the data from some of these. But he used 706 different pieces of reports, extrapolating what the people had reported seeing. And from that, he puts together the data. Now, if the data is false, if this is a myth, if this is something that does not exist, that chart would be all over the place. But the overall was every single, well, you won't see it on the charts tonight, every single chart that he had a bell curve, and a bell curve is indicative of a living, breathing population in relation to other statistical studies that have been done with scientifically known and proven animals. So you have that this data to suggest that, hey, this is a real event going on here. This is not something that's made up. It's not a figment of people's imaginations. It's not misidentification, because the data wasn't all over the place. It actually had a bell curve. So here's some of the information about their tracks and their feet. It has a slow cadence coupled with prolonged ground contact of the feet. So it takes quick steps. There is a suppression of vertical body oscillation described as a compliant walk. The gait is characterized as a bent hip, bent knee bipedal walk, which we've seen on the Patterson-Gimlin film as well, which is different from the human stiff-legged mode.
Yes.
This walking style has been frequently commented upon by eyewitnesses for its conspicuous fluid grace. It doesn't bound up. We kind of oscillate when we walk because we're stiff when we walk. So as we hit different height elevations, we tend to bounce when we walk a little bit. Right. Now, if you bend your hips, then you can move. And I'm moving my legs, but my legs are bent. But if I was stiff legging, you see how I have to pick myself up a little bit. So that's the difference between a human walk and a Sasquatch type. So that's why it's fluid gray. Some observers likened it to like they were riding on a bicycle, and people just describe, here's this thing just going right across the field like that.
Smooth, yeah.
Now, here's an interesting thing. If a bear was to walk upright, it would be very stiff. It does not, and it would be very like, now, because it's just walking on two little legs. So it would take a little more time for it. The descriptions we have a lot of times are, with these huge strides, it's in and out. They're really fast. They are,
well, their gait, the way they walk, we would term that. Well, in the military and special forces, they teach you to stealth walk, and that's where you have bent knees. You place the front of the foot down first before you place the heel, and you walk very smoothly and very quietly that way.
And you also have bent hips as well.
Yeah.
Yep, because you're almost like in a half crouch.
Yes.
And anybody who plays Call of Duty would know that. You hit that. You hit the B button, and the guy goes.
Yeah. But I think their standard mode of motivation is what we would call stealth walking. And whereas humans, the way our foot is designed and the way our leg is designed with our heel and stuff, we kind of like pole vault. So we're like boom, boom, and the head is bopping up and down.
Well, Mick says he's not getting his notifications for the shows. What I would do is just go back and hit the notification bell again, Mick. We have, you may have been relying on the old TubeBuddy page we were using. That was really an ineffective and a cost ineffective item that we were using. It was another website that was sending out email notifications. You should get them directly in YouTube. What you do is just go into your settings for the channel and make sure that the notifications are on. That's the best I can tell you there. Kaiju Ninja made a good comment here too. That is that present in the Freeman footage? It kind of looks like it when it takes that first step. Absolutely. To me, the Freeman footage, the reason why it only bounces a little bit is because it's going down a hill a little bit. And if you look, the hill is down and then flattens out and then down again. So it kind of like makes that kind of, but it is kind of, and again, it's stride. And even if you look at it closely, you can probably tell by the straddle looks appropriate for a Sasquatch. That's why people ask me why I believe in this stuff. And you can't really, it's still an objective or a subjective observation. It's not proof, but in looking at that, knowing what I have known this stuff for years. I've lived, breathed, and lived this stuff for the last 25 years. And I realized that perhaps people don't know my point of views because they do not understand the materials that we had back in the 90s to unfold this. And I got to say, it's much easier now with, AI to use, to put those articles in there, to parse it. So you don't have to sit there and try to figure out a 10-page report. You can break it down very concisely into a page with some bullets.
But that's
and you got to ask the right questions too.
Smooth gait is very evident in the Patterson-Gimlin film. After MK Davis did the screenshots and put the video where he leveled Patty and let the background move around, he did that frame by frame, and that shows you how smooth she was walking across that sandbar. You see that head, there's not much movement. It's pretty straight, pretty smooth. Whereas a human would be bobbing up and down.
Correct.
And we know from the measurements on the trackway that the stride, the length between the toe and the heel of the next track was between 42 and 46 inches when she was walking. Now, they also said that it picked up when she picked up speed towards the end. it stretched out to about 65 inches. So 42 to 46 inches. Mark that on your floor with a measuring tape.
You know what?
Mhm.
Kaiju says would be tough to do with legs bent for a human.
Right. Yeah.
Truthfully, let me comment on that. When I'm moving in the woods and I want to be quiet, because like I said, 25 years of doing this, guess what I'm doing? I'm walking with my legs bent, my knees bent, and my hips bent, and I'm moving. And believe it or not, it's actually easier to go over terrain that way.
Yep.
Because you're not putting yourself, we're meant for walking, and this is the way we have evolved over time on flat surfaces. If you've noticed, even though we had cavemen, we as Homo sapiens and even Homo erectus did not propagate in mountains. We propagated in the flatlands and on the plains and on the steppes, right? Yep. We were meant to walk on flat surfaces.
And really,
conversely, the Pongids and some of the earlier Homo species like Homo habilis and Homo floresiensis and Homo naledi, they had combinations where they had straight line toes, but they had reversion back to that midfoot flexibility, which is more arboreal. And give me 1 second, Chris, say what you're going to say, because the office assistant is knocking.
Go ahead, bud. Well, I was just going to say that that's true. It's more difficult for a human to walk with their, let's say, with their knees bent rather than locked, because that puts all the pressure on our thigh muscles to hold us up. Now, with a Sasquatch, I'm sure they've got quite a bit more thigh muscle than what we have. But that smooth gait, that requires a bent knee gait. And that was one of the experiments I did when I was investigating on the Patterson-Gimlin film, because we know we had 42. Oh, there's Watson. There's the office assistant. Since we know we had the measurement of the trackway, they measured the stride. So you just take a measuring tape and mark down 42 inches on the floor. Put down a piece of tape. Then measure out 42 inches away from that tape, and then put down another piece of tape. Now walk across, make those steps with bent knees without bobbing your head up and down, and see if you can do that. And you're probably going to need to be about 6'5" to even attempt it. But even at that, I don't think you'll make it. My nephew couldn't do it without his head bobbing up and down, because he was trying to lock his knees back in place. So, I don't think it's possible for a human to do it. But, like the problem with that, though, is me and Steve discussed it. Well, if that film was faked, they certainly could have faked the trackway.
That's
the problem.
Mick just mentioned he's 6'6". Mick is a Sasquatch, I think.
Yeah, Mick, you can walk bent knees with a smooth gait, and the top of your head will be level, look like you're on roller skates. Okay. But when you start stretching it out between 42 and 46 inches on your stride, that's going to stretch your legs out, and the top of your head is going to go down. And then when you step, the top of your head is going to go back up.
Right.
So it's a really cool experiment. Had it not been for the
Sasquatch
question.
Yep. The Sasquatch reportedly has a longer bipedal double support during the stride cycle. This means that both feet are on the ground for a longer portion of each step compared to humans, which means we quick step a lot of times.
Right.
Because of this thing is a little more that's fascinating.
Right. And it's just the difference in the way we walk. When we're walking normally, we've got our knees locked and we're pole vaulting.
Now, why are they flat-footed? It's because this adaptation is believed to reduce peak forces during heel strike and toe off.
Right.
And divides the body weight more evenly between the 2 feet. Yeah. And it also divides it within the foot itself. There's not as much, like because we use the ball of our foot, there's more of a lever action. right? So the foot comes down and then it bends up and it comes up. So there's no lever action in the walking. So that's why a Sasquatch is flat-footed. Now, if you think about this, if we all put this in our mind and think about the mechanics of a stepping Sasquatch, this all makes sense why they're flat-footed, right?
Yeah. You gotta have a foot to support that much weight, because they're gonna weigh a whole lot more than what we weigh. And if a Sasquatch tried to walk with our feet, he'd end up with a bunch of broken bones in the foot.
And this is consistent with primates that do still have a midfoot flexibility in their tracks. So that's another very interesting fact. Who would know this back in the 1950s when we started pulling tracks? But if you think about it, tracks have been reported for, a few hundred years already.
Right.
So,
yeah, Lewis and Clark found tracks.
Right. Again, some footprints suggest a metatarsal hinge showing flexing of the middle foot, similar to a gorilla's foot, rather than having a rigid arch like the humans.
Right. Yeah, the arch would be no good for supporting that kind of weight.
And I appreciate that Wolf. He believes PG's film was real. Freeman was a person in costume. Perfectly entitled to that opinion. I actually think that Freeman footage is real. I'm leaning towards more that it's real than it's not, for a lot of those reasons. If you think about some of the mechanics we talked about, the way it moves, it does not look like a person in a costume to me. But and Mick, that's very true. He says, but again, Wolf, you're entitled to your beliefs, and so. The interesting thing is, and folks, if you want to screenshot this stuff, go right ahead. This is some of the tools I use off the Fahrenbach study of John Green's data. And this is where it becomes a little more, how should I say? There is this is not hypothetical here. This is the facts as the reports came in and were correlated. And this is a correlation between the heel width and foot length. So there is a correlation between that, as you can see. So when I'm looking at tracks, I turn to this chart and I look and see if it's within those parameters. That's really great. Like, people wonder, well, how do you know that track is not real, Steve? Well, it doesn't correlate with this particular chart, but I don't tell them that because people don't know that chart. And usually when I know it's not a Sasquatch print, generally because of this chart as a basis, there's a couple of other charts you're going to see as well. It kind of helps me discern what's going on with the track. So that is correlation between Sasquatch heel width and foot length. Next chart we have is the Sasquatch step length versus foot length. So the size of the foot proportional to what the the actual stride was,
right,
or step length. And
the stride will change, depending on what the creature is doing at that time. If it's just walking a normal stride, like Patterson Gimlin, the Patty was 42 to 46. When it got speeded up, it stretched that stride out.
And if you think about this, they have this kind of bent hip, bent knee gait, and they're still getting a huge sign. So when they go to a run, they tend to straighten up a little bit, and that's why they move even faster.
Right. Incredible speed.
And the last chart of the night we're going to show is the Sasquatch height versus foot length. That was charted as well. And this, as I mentioned, there were 706 reports, I believe. It was over 700. I believe it was 706 was the number of reports using the John Green database and John Green's basically report methodologies. And obviously there was... I'm sure there's probably some reports that did not have track data with it, but for the witness, when they did retrieve tracks, They had their track measurements. They had the height measurements from the witness.
Over 700 reports.
Over
That's a
700
pretty
reports.
good, yeah, that's a pretty good
That,
data model.
that's a good sample.
Yeah.
And, folks will say, well, that data is like 30 years old. And, some of it's even 50. Doesn't matter. I mean, this is
Still
just
good.
data. It's all reported sightings. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we look at whales in the last 60 years and it all charts the same over the years, unless there's an evolutionary shift. It took a couple of, I mean, if it was just 200 years down the road, this data is 200 years old, I would say, well, we really need to redo this study, because as we've seen in human evolution, that years ago, the average person was 5'9". Now it's 6 foot. We've become bigger. We've become more robust. And then again, we have the, not that done.
Well, I think in the U.S., that's
then again,
the diversity of the population.
We also have Bergman's rule too, which can interplay into it as well. And Bergman's rule is, there are differentiations in heights because of, environmental conditions.
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting question. Kaiju says, how tall do I think a Sasquatch can get? I would say the outliers probably would be at like a 9 feet. That would be my guess, and that's only a guess. It's my opinion. It has nothing to do with any kind of base data. But from what I've seen over reports over the air, I mean, I know there's people, it was 10 foot tall. Again, when you're looking up, I always bring this story up that when we're all little, as little kids, we think our parents are huge. We think our grandparents are huge. And as we get older and grow, we realize that, dude, they ain't very tall.
Yeah.
Right? Think of the perception, right? Think of the perception of people when they see me. People, for many years thought I was this tall, big guy. And as it turned out, I'm 5'9". I'm not tall.
You'll always be 10 foot tall to me, Steve.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on that.
I think they can get big.
When you get to a certain height, you tend to lose perspective. Right. If you're looking at something, I mean, it's like go in front of a building, right? How tall is that building? Well, yeah, okay. You can look at a 2-story building and go, okay, well, it's about 20 feet tall, right? But you go to a 136 floor skyscraper and try to figure out the actual height with that. And you're like, I can't tell because the floors aren't broken off, right? Yeah. So you really...
Well, you can count the windows.
Truth that. Jay Fritz said Steve was taller when he had hair. Amen. And I haven't had hair in a long friggin' time. Yeah, I think it was probably when I was about 26, 27, I used to get brush cuts because I was a paramedic at the time, and I used to keep my hair really short and, fire department stuff. You didn't want hair, all of that. And one day I had my hair shaved, and, I sent it on vacation. It just didn't bother coming back. So...
Yeah, just always remember if you have a sighting, if the creature is standing next to a tree, since you're going to be in the woods, it probably will be. Just keep in your mind's eye where the top of that creature's head was at, and try to find a limb on the nearest tree to correlate. That way, you can go back and measure that limb from the ground. The sighting I had in 2011, it was like I said, it was about 100 feet away, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know. I never really walked it out. I didn't have a wheel at the time. But there was a utility, but it was standing right next to a utility pole. So off of that, I could kind of guesstimate the height. And it was between 7.5 and 8 foot tall. Your average typical Sasquatch. Right.
The one I had seen a year later, that one, I was only 50 feet or less away from that one. Probably between 35 and 50 feet. And it was like, it was a little smaller than me. And so that's why I kind of figured about 5'5". Now, could it have been 5'6", 5'7", maybe, but it was definitely a juvenile. And that was long story. The stories are on the channel somewhere, but I don't want to go into all of that tonight. But yeah, it was when you, like I said, the taller you get, the more perspective you lose. But so that's another chart. So if folks have had a chance to screenshot, you can always go back and replay and grab screen grabs of those charts.
Yeah.
Use them. Please use them. This
Yeah.
is good material for you guys to kind of base your own little investigations at home.
Use your Windows snipping tool.
Yep.
You can catch it.
Makes sense. When I hear about sightings of a creature 12 to 15 feet tall, I immediately file it with the finding of horse feathers. Very true, because if you think about it, if something is 10 feet tall, that is huge. That would be kind of hard to hide in the woods, wouldn't it be? You know, like I said, the outlier at 9 feet, you're beginning to perhaps you're going to start noticing these things a lot. They're not going to have the grace. And we have to look at the PG film. If you believe in the PG film, you know, depending on who you talk to, it's anywhere from between 6'8" and 7'4". So that all falls within the realm of what we say.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, Wolf Killer. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Bill Munns has got one of the best studies on the Patterson-Gimlin film I think anybody has ever done, including using the science. And he's done things that nobody else has done.
If there is any, you know, I have Grover Krantz books. I have Dr. Jeff Meldrum's books. I have Brian Sykes' book, the late Dr. Brian Sykes. I have Roger. I have Bill Munns's book, When Roger Met Patty, and I have the Bluff Creek Project book. So the data in that, the information in those books, and all of those books are just phenomenal. And then I have other books that, like the Boggy Creek case. The Boggy Creek case book, stuff like that, are great for pulling out behavior details and stuff like that. The Bigfoot case book, people forget about that. Now, one thing I found out about the Bigfoot case book, which were written by Colin and Joan Board, they're from the UK. They collected all these Bigfoot stories. I found that some of them, their time and dates were correct, but some of the details on them were a little bit off on the cases I know, because they talked about cases in my area and they were off a little bit. So, you know, you always have to take everything with a grain of salt, and like compilation books like that. Unless something is really detailed, you know, if there's detailed accounts, like Doug Waller writes very detailed books on, and he's got like 7 or 8 books. When he takes reports, he puts them in story form. So those encounters are very detailed. And from that, you can ascertain they're probably accurate as to what the witness had seen. When you look at a summary report, you got to kind of, okay. Now, I can say this also, that Monsters of the North Woods and Bigfoot Encounters in New England, New York and New England, which is, both books were written by Paul Bartholomew. Monsters of the North Woods was written by Paul Bartholomew, Robert Bartholomew, Bill Brand, and Bruce Hallenbeck. That was a compilation of reports. Those are very accurate as to it. And knowing my old mentor, Bill Brand, I would expect no less, because he was a very, very big stickler on. And that's the other thing, is that my mentors were Paul Bartholomew and Bill Brand, and Paul was the guy who went out and collected those stories, and one of those guys who would go out. And Bill was a guy that would put boots on the ground and be a stickler for detail and a stickler for fact and towing the line. So, all right, I gotta let the office assistant out now.
Interesting stats. Average height estimated to be 7'10". So yeah, well, that figures out well. I think a lot of it, people may be misunderstanding about judging the height, because if you take like a 2x4 that's 8 feet long and hold that up, you know, that's pretty tall. It's really tall. So I think people might be seeing a shorter
Yeah,
creature.
and Jen's right too. I mean, we can. I can't say that joke. This is a family show. Pat Collins. And Jen makes a great point too. You add the stress factor in, and I talk about that in my latest book too. Up Time for a Shameless Plug: Psychology of Bigfoot. Came out June 1st. I talk about different things about how people perceive things and etc. But anyway, the average height of an is estimated at 7 foot 10 inches. That's the average height, calculated with an average weight of 660 pounds. Again, these are estimated. The average footprint length, which is more objective than subjective, was 15.6 inches long. Very par for the course what we get up here in New York State. The average pace length is 5 feet, 60 inches. And using models of other primates and other Homo sapiens and stuff like that, gathering all the statistics using that height and weight distribution of those particular animals, and then putting that and plugging in. Basically, the way it was done is take the height and weight distribution of each one of these primates and compile that to their age, and then you'll come up with an average thing, and then you can apply that formula to what we have here. And then what you have is the growth curve for a female Sasquatch suggests sexual maturity at 9 to 10 years old and a lifespan of about 36 years old. So that's very fascinating stuff. I don't know exactly how he came to that. I could break it down more and I can read more about it. But like I said, this is data sets that I've worked with for years. Now that to me is interesting, but it's really inconsequential to other Bigfoot investigations, right? Because who cares how old it is? We know what height it is. We know what weight it may be, stuff like that.
Well, I think he's probably trying to do some comparison there to the other known primates like gorillas and stuff.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's reaching a little bit. I think it's reaching.
No. It actually is not. Like I said, if you take the formula for the based on we know what the average lifespan of a Homo sapien is, correct?
Right.
We know what the lifespan of a chimpanzee is, correct? And a gorilla and an orangutan and a bonobo, and then you put all of that together based on we know what their average age is, and now we know what their average height and weight is, right? So then you come up with a formula that basically says we know that for this height and weight, we come up with this value. It's very similar to the way we broke down the Canadian, the boater video. Mm-hmm. Was if it's this tall, this is the value. If it's this tall, this is the value. If it's this tall, this is the value. And we realized the stride length was not big enough to be a Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. Right? It was a human stride length. So that's how we kind of figured it was a person in the costume, and then the boat weight kind of confirmed that when we got the video, the actual larger video. So, and again, there is proof that statistics can work very good to debunk something.
Trackway says, "Oh, throw ratio math at us."
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. That's what scientists work with, and that's what we should be working with is data sets. Data sets will bring you to some ideas, and people wonder, well, how the hell can you figure some of this stuff out, Steve? And it's because I've used these data sets for years.
Yeah, Wolf Killer's got a good one here. It says, so if Bigfoot has a stride of 60 inches, are they jogging or walking? That's a good question.
That's an average stride. So I'm sure there were some that were in a run, and there were probably some that were in a walking. Right. And when you start putting the numbers together, and a 60-inch stride is nothing. I mean, there's been ones that have been 48, 50, 52 inches. Yeah. I mean, you're just talking maybe about another 8 inches. And if it's right a run, it's going to,
Yeah.
You know, if
Yeah,
you
they can
talk,
really stretch it way out there when they're running. Yeah.
well, like Pat Collins was saying, and I investigated Pat's sighting, and you know, Pat stated that the Sasquatch he saw basically took 4 steps over U.S. Route 9.
Yeah.
And in that particular portion, U.S. Route 9 isn't very heavily traveled, especially at the time Pat was there.
Right.
And, you know, that's a 2-lane highway with a 3.5-foot shoulder on each side.
Yeah.
So, 3 steps, that is about a 60 to 65 inch stride.
Right.
And it was booking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on, you have to really, if you just find a trackway, you have to investigate the track itself and read it to determine, well, was the creature walking or was it running?
Right. And especially if a lot of these sightings may have been roadside crossings, some of these roadside crossings. And when you have a roadside crossing, you can open up the throttle a little bit with your stride because you don't have objects you have to navigate like brush and rocks, stones, different types of, changes of substrate, correct? Yeah. So, that definitely would hinder some of the stride.
That's why it's important, to maybe study up a little bit on tracking. Now, I was raised in the country, and I had a granddad that was really good at it, and he tried to teach me. I didn't learn much of it, but I learned enough. And so study up on tracking, what a track looks like, what the animal's doing.
Right.
Learn about foot strike and kick and push off
and depth
things of that nature.
And depth,
yeah.
Learn
about that stuff.
Ties you with another great question. Do you think Sasquatch climb and stay in trees a lot? Here's my thoughts on that. In 2003, I got the Pridgeon video, aka the New York Baby video. And I remember having a discussion with the late, great Bobby Short over, well, what makes you think that Bigfoot goes in trees? And I said, wait a minute. This is not a full-grown adult Bigfoot that we see in this tree. And this is a very young juvenile. Right. We see a larger object. We see it jump off either the back or the front of it, move a little bit over the tree limbs, climb up, swing a couple of times, and then drop into a tree.
Yeah.
Has no tail. And it's very, very fleeting, but it's large, and again, it's in a place where you are not allowed to have primates, either in the state, unless you're a licensed zookeeper, or even on the property because they didn't allow pets. And all of this information it was corroborated. And
I think they allow the young ones to play in the trees because...
Well, when we're younger as primates, we climb things. Baby gorillas climb things, even though they're floor dwellers, right? Forest floor dwellers.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is because we're learning about our hands and feet. So that's why even as young Homo sapien children, we climb trees. We climb things. That's why they have monkey bars and hence the term monkey bars. We have monkey bars in parks because we're learning how to use our hands and feet, learning their dexterity. But as Dr. Meldrum has pointed out too, when we get a lot older, when we start getting older, we gain a little bit of weight, don't we?
Right.
Some more than others. Mm. And what happens is some of those branches are not going to support our weight any longer. Right. And the other thing happens too is we start to lose some of our flexibility and our limberness. Our bones become more rigid. Remember, a young child, I've seen this happen. I've seen a 3-year-old child responding to a call in Green Island, New York, one time back in '93. A child fell out of a 2nd-story window, a 3-year-old. Hit the grass below and did not even break a bone. And the reason why is that at that age, at a very young age, the bones are very flexible. They're not rigid, right?
Yeah.
So that's another reason why we have a predisposition not to start climbing things without a lot of aids at an older age, because if we fall, we're going to break something. And if we're heavier and that tree branch breaks, not only is the tree broken, but we're broken too.
Yep.
So, and then as we get older, we become a lot less limber. I mean, it's not easy if I have to get under the sink to replace a pipe at my age versus 30 years ago, right? So I think that they do not, obviously with the reports of many nesting sites where there's been legitimate reports of, fauna laid out on the ground and appeared to be laid in and stuff like that over the last 100 years or so. I think it's safe to assume that they do not go up in trees as adults, but as a young, they might scamper up there to avoid prey and predators. So a very complicated question for a complicated answer for a simple question.
Well, I think they can go up in a tree. As a matter of fact, that's one of my theories about how they bring trees down. They use their weight. The heavier male Sasquatches will use their weight to climb up in a tree and then lean that tree over and bring the tree down that way rather than actually physically pushing it over. But now that's just a theory that they could use leverage to bring the tree down rather than physical strength. Because I don't think they're strong enough to push one over.
But I don't think necessarily that means they hang out in trees.
No, I don't think they do. No. No, I wouldn't.
Because like I say, you're talking about putting a 660-pound weight into a tree. That's a lot of weight.
Right.
That's a lot of weight.
Yeah, the kids can bop up and down the trees, but the mom and dads probably stay out of it unless there's something going on.
Yep.
Good question. Really good question. And it sparks a lot of thought. It really does. Yeah. I used to do the same thing. Mick said I'd climb to the top of the tree as high as I could. I did too, Mick. Did the same thing. And here in Kentucky, we had cedar trees here too locally, and you could climb one. When I was around 90 pounds, okay, you could climb a cedar tree that was basically about 6 inches in diameter. And when you get up to a part up near the top, hang on to it and jump out. And you could ride the tree to the ground. It would lower you to the ground, not really slowly, but slow enough you wouldn't break anything. You used to ride the trees. That was fun.
Pat Collins said I can barely climb a bar stool now. Right. And we also have to remember, too, that, Finding Trackway, same age as Steven, climbs trees every year using climbing tree stands. Yeah. Okay, I get that. But we have to realize, too, that a Sasquatch, remember, we can't put anthropomorphic traits onto a Sasquatch. Just because we do a thing using a tree stand doesn't mean they would go up there and make a tree stand and go up and sit in a tree, right? Otherwise, that would probably be discovered as well. Bristol, that is, actually, it's on the it's actually on the other side of the Hudson River from Poughkeepsie. It's actually, I want to say it's Ulster County. It's more near Modena, New York. Modena. Well, no, I'm not saying they're like our own children. They're like primate young. And that's why we believe, Sasquatch is a primate, and all primate young like to climb things, because again, it's about the learning experience, about, and they, at Woodbooker Farm says, in my opinion, they use trees for blinds, a sort of corral to hunt. Maybe so. We know they use them for cover, and they stand very close to them. A lot of times there's reports of them swaying, and that's a very big gorilla or a chimpanzee type of thing, a very primatal type of thing.
Well, in 2010, I lost a trackway that I was following and had been following for a while, and he just disappeared. And after the fact, I remembered there were trees around there. So something that whoever was leaving those tracks had went to the trees and thrown me off. Their trackway just ended, just like disappeared. And so that I'm pretty sure they used the trees. They skated over, a few trees over, then popped back down over there where I wouldn't pick up their trail. Now that's some pretty deep thought, like counting on somebody knowingly going to follow your trail and then throwing them off. That's pretty deep.
Or if you ever think about it, maybe they sidestepped you. I mean, especially if you sidestep in the substrate that's not as porous as,
Oh, well, I used the stick and everything trying to locate them. And, I was like about 15 feet around looking for the trail and couldn't find it nowhere. It's my belief they went up in the trees and they tapped it, went out to another tree and then came down, well out of the area where I was looking. But yeah, that was my plan. I was going to follow those tracks to the source. And
now,
that's,
this is very interesting too, is that Woodbooger Farm says, I have found deer tracks mixed with, basically booger tracks. And I get that in some parts of the country, they call them boogers, not Bigfoot. They were both on the run towards, what he calls a kill box, and it appeared to be an ambush. The video of deer hair and blood in a tree used, and they use it to smash the deer. And that makes a lot of sense. If you have something, again, we're going to get into one other fact of what they can lift, but it would pick up the deer and it uses it to crush it against a tree. That would kind of make sense as far as, how it would go about killing something, or, maybe even breaking it down so it can pull it apart and consume it.
But I've noticed, though, you will find deer tracks right along in the same area that you find Bigfoot tracks. It's usually always the same. Like that one, I sent you a picture of a small track, and in that track there were deer tracks in there. There was a rabbit poop, all in the same area.
Now, I will also make a comment too, and this just came into my head too, is that we talk about tree climbing and stuff like that. The midfoot flexibility, is kind of a trait of a tree climber. Right. So understand that too. But the inline toes are not. The inline toes are of a walker. So it has this combination of a foot where it has inline toes and a flexible foot. And it's amazing to me because, people will give this a human quality because of that footprint and having inline toes.
Mm-hmm.
They're no more human than the Homo habilis.
But with that midfoot flexibility, they will be able to climb trees better than you or I.
Yeah.
Still.
Well, yeah, because they have that foot flexibility.
Midfoot flexibility. Yeah.
They would climb even better, and this is another reason why I don't think they climb trees, is because a lot of your tree climbers use that opposable toe that's on their feet, whereas a Sasquatch has inline toes, so it doesn't make it 100% efficient to climb trees.
Yeah. But you can still that foot could bend and then curve around the tree. They're well adapted to climbing trees, but except for their weight.
And in Woodbooger Farm, the mid-tarsal break is the same thing as midfoot flexibility. Actually, the more anthropological term is midfoot flexibility rather than a mid-tarsal break. I've learned that over the last month or so, but because a lot of reference in anthropological scientific stuff, especially when talking about Homo habilis and Homo florensis and Homo noleti, they talk about the midfoot flexibility. That's how it's termed.
In combination with the inline toes.
Yeah, which Homo noleti had. They did not have that opposable toe. Bigfoot hair. Let's talk about Bigfoot hair for a little bit. Sasquatch hair, like that of other primates, has mostly a consistent diameter throughout its length. the medulla, the central canal, is absent in highly pigmented Sasquatch hair and lightly pigmented Sasquatch hair, similar to blonde human hair. Dark pigmented Sasquatch hair has a non-cellular amorphous medulla. It's currently challenging to definitively differentiate between human hair and Sasquatch hair. That's a very interesting thing. That could lend a little bit that it may be towards more us than, say, a pongid. Sasquatch hair length can vary from a couple of inches to 15 inches, as it does on human and Homo sapiens and other primates as well. Just to make that side note. And while it exhibits various colors, its most often characteristics is a reddish cast under a microscope, and that's very interesting. That all the hairs, regardless. Now, for those who don't know, Henner examined a number of purported Sasquatch hair, but because it lacked a medulla, they could not DNA type it or get any further data from it. So that was a big thing. A big thing that was talked about in the 90s was the Sasquatch hair lacking a medulla. But it's amazing to say that most of the hair, regardless if it's blonde or black or brown, under the microscope, it casts kind of a rust-colored or reddish color. So
I think the DNA technology has advanced now, because I think they can actually crush and destroy a hair sample and pull DNA from it now.
Perhaps.
That's what Sykes did when he did a report on that.
Okay, so Mick asked,
what was that?
Do you think
the polar bear thing?
Right, yeah, that Arctic bear that supposedly they thought might have been extinct.
Ooh, I don't think so.
No, and and you know why? Because nothing with hair sheds. Nothing with hair sheds. Things with fur shed. Bear shed, dog shed, except certain dogs like Shih Tzus, because Shih Tzus, and I know because the office is a Shih Tzu, he has hair. It grows. It has to be cut, right? So when you have something that needs to be cut for length, it doesn't shed.
Right.
So when you look at like even a poodle, you have to shave a poodle. They don't shed. Yeah. German Shepherds shed like them.
Well, you can also
no primate, lower primate or New World monkey or higher primate or great ape, none of them shed. We lose hair naturally. It falls out eventually, but it's not considered. It's not like where all of a sudden in a season we lose a coat, because we don't have coats. We have hair. So.
And you can do your own research. If you find some unidentified hairs or hairs you may have question about, you can purchase. I mean, this is how great modern technology is gotten now. For around $20 to $30 or something like that, you can purchase a microscope off of the Amazon jungle site, whatever, and you can put that hair under a microscope and look at it on your computer screen or on your computer monitor.
And if you and I know a couple of ladies and think, well, I have hair and I shed. You're not shedding. That's actually the hair follicle dying.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And then you may have a regrowth of a follicle, or the actual follicle itself dies and it falls out. Yeah. And
Mick says fair points, Steve, but Sasquatch hair also lack a medulla. Yeah, you could verify that under your own microscope. And Google, you can do online. There's so many slides, hair samples you can look at for comparison.
Let me clarify that. Is that the hair they have looked at lacked a medulla?
Right.
Doesn't mean they do not have a medulla.
Right. That may have not necessarily been Sasquatch hair that they looked at.
Very true. So, even Dr. Meldrum, I believe Dr. Meldrum and I had a conversation about this, and I think he said that, some of the medulla may actually be faint or very or much narrower,
right,
than what we're used to. So sometimes
But if you're doing your own research on hair that you've collected or one of your team members has collected, invest in a microscope. Look for things like the main thing. Look at the tip of the hair. Has it been cut, or is it goes to a sharp point?
Yeah. You want to know definition of irony, Chris?
What's that, man?
The two bald guys here on the show are talking about hair.
I know about hair. I just don't know how to grow it.
I know how to grow it. I go to the barber. I tell him a little off the back. I mean, a little off the back. Anyway,
yeah, you can do your own science work for a matter of $20-$30, and if you have a hair sample or you locate a hair sample or one of your buddies found something, it's worth it to look at it because you may have something worth sending off for verification. And the way the technology is now, and I'm sure it's improved since Dr. Brian Sykes did his study on the Arctic bear. I'm pretty sure that you could probably send a DNA sample off of a hair sample.
Now, here's some interesting statistics out of the study. Again, this is not subjective.
Right.
This is hair color. Dark or black, slightly over 60% of the sightings fall into this category for this study. This includes variants described as brown black, red black, and dark brown.
Right.
Brown was about 30% of sightings described as brown, including dark brown, light brown, and red brown. And then others were about 10% of all the other sightings, which included gray, light, off-white, white, and blonde category, which includes descriptions as dark and light gray, gray brown, silver gray, silver, and silver tip. Now, the interesting thing is that I remember a report out of Pennsylvania with a couple of guys riding horseback, and one actually happened to be a state trooper, a very high-ranking state trooper. And they were riding down a horse trail, and they said the thing looked just as surprised to see them as they were it. And it was a 5 foot tall silver, or actually they described it like it had the hair color of like the blue hair, the little old ladies,
right?
The blue hair.
Right.
That's silver.
Yeah.
They described the hair as a silver one. And it looked at them like all surprised, and they just beat feet out. No, Wolf Keller. What I'm saying is that none of the primates shed. I believe Bigfoot is a primate, which it has all the standards of it.
No.
And because of that, Bigfoot does not shed. No,
right.
Negative. Otherwise, again, and we're going to get into another topic. If they shed, my guess is we would have found a lot of their hair.
A lot of hair samples.
At one point, that's a pretty. I mean, think about it. Like I said, my German Shepherd, and somebody, if I take the brush to her, which she hates, by the way. I mean, what dog hates a brush? I've never seen that. But anyway, you brush her. If we kept the hair for like a couple of weeks, we'd have a whole nother German Shepherd. So imagine something that's 660 pounds and on average about 7 foot tall. That's a lot of friggin' hair.
Well, let's talk about something here, Steve, while we're on the topic. Where would be a good place or good situations to look for hair samples? Like in the woods, snags on the side of a tree.
Snags on the side of a tree. Look on the ground. Sometimes there's a lot of brambles on the ground, and if you're tracking something that's walking, it might catch one of those leg hairs.
Right.
Now, mind you got to understand that, and this is something that really made me look at the Patterson-Gimlin film with a lot of recognition, is that, where there is a lot of wear and tear, there is less hair.
Yeah.
And if you look at Patty, if you notice, her thighs had less hair.
Right.
Under her arms had less hair.
Yes.
Along the sides of the thoracic cavity. You do not have hair. So that
typical high wear areas will be less hair. Yeah.
So to me, it didn't look like a suit because of that. There it is. Thank you so much, Jay.
Jay, thank you so much. You guys are too kind. Oh, man. But yeah, I think, personally, I think if you have a sighting and the creature is near a tree, they try to blend in with trees. And I think that they will put their arm around a tree or in behind a tree to kind of blend in or get close with the tree to make you think they're part of the tree. And so it's a good idea if you're in a sighting area to check out the bark around trees, especially if you find footprints next to a tree.
Or the branches of the brambles.
Yes.
The you find it track way say are Velcro strips. That's that's right. But Velcro wasn't invented in 1967.
That's a good thought. Could a Sasquatch use a tree as a scratching post?
Absolutely.
I suppose they could. I mean, they probably got itches just like we get them.
Guess what? If I get it back, if I get like, oh man, and I can't reach it, especially with my neck injury, I can't get my arms cranked the way I used to back. The best thing I can find is a brick wall because it's got that coarse surface. So.
And, one of the things I'm hopeful about, especially in the Pacific Northwest where they're studying those nests, is they'll be able to do some forensic recovery of the ground area inside that nest and get any loose
DNA, right?
hairs. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Great spot to be looking for hairs if you could find a nest. Whatever kind of hair you find in there is going to be a good indication of what was using that nest.
Exactly. Wow. So let's talk about tree breaks. Because I'm so tired of seeing all these tree breaks. Now, mind you, this is in terms of tracking. What is a Sasquatch versus what is not? Too many times we see people posting pictures on social media of tree breaks with no other associated evidence.
All right.
And I once had a researcher go into this area that had no history of Bigfoot sightings and comes back and goes, look at all these tree breaks. This has got to be Bigfoot. Did you find any tracks? No. Hair? No. Any sighting reports to report? No. Then how the hell do you know this is Bigfoot? Right. There are no other corroborative things. Yep. It's kind of like this. If we find a piece of for example, something gets stolen from a store on the corner, right? And we go around the block and find a piece of the stolen merchandise on the ground. We can't tell the sex of the person that stole it. We can't tell the height of the person that stole it. We can't tell, right?
Right.
We can't even tell that if it was dropped there to begin with. That could have been dropped over there and then got kicked or knocked into another area, right? Without any evidence to support that. Yeah. So when you find tree breaks, if you can't find tracks, and believe it or not, here's the other big issue I have is that when certain people will look at these tree breaks, assume it's Sasquatch, start looking for track evidence and find something that may look like a track, start taking pictures of it because they have confirmation bias that this is caused by a Sasquatch. So that little dent over there in the ground has got to be a Sasquatch too. So you have to use a clear mind. The first piece of evidence you should always look for is the track, not the break.
You got to find a track way. not one.
If it becomes a little different, if 100 yards away there was a Bigfoot sighting last week, that becomes a little more. So Sasquatch-related tree breaks, twisting and snapping. Yeah. Tops of trees, they twist. And the reason why is as they're walking, and I even have pictures of this for crying out loud. The one I tracked in Whitehall, that where 5 people had 2 sightings. Excuse me. Where 5 people had 2 sightings over the course of a half hour. 3 people initially, followed up by 2 people a half hour later in the same area, very within feet. And where the tree breaks were, as it's walking, it's grabbing the branches and pulling them down. And as they pull them down, they're rolling their wrist, and it's snapping the branches. So what do you have? You have these branches at the 6-foot level, because that's about where a 7-foot, 8-foot creature's shoulders would be. And it's pushing those branches out of the way. And as it's pushing them, it's rolling them. And as it's rolling them, it's snapping them and twisting them.
Yeah.
That's where tree breaks came into. That's what the tree breaks that people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s were talking about. Social media went crazy when tree breaks, and they're looking for every single tree break they can find and try to attribute, because of confirmation bias, to a Sasquatch.
Yeah. First, you got to have the tracks. Once you got the tracks, then you can start looking up for tree breaks, because I think these things are smart. Okay. They know they've only got 2 eyes. And if they walk through the woods and they got brush, a tree limb smacking them in the eyeball, they're going to lose one. So the smart thing to do would be to, kind of push that stuff away from your head. And, who knows why they twist. I don't know why. Wow.
Kaiju Ninja, you have to look for that twist at the 6-foot level. 5'9", 5'7", 6 foot. 6'5", 7 foot. You got to look for those tree breaks.
Got to be up,
and they're twisting. If you and I will say this, say the twist, you can't really see the twist, because every once in a while a tree will break off, but it'll fall down, so you really can't see the twist. Right. You may not miss a twist. If you're having consistent breaks at that level, something large has moved through that area.
Right.
And I've seen that probably half a dozen times in 25 years off of Bigfoot report sightings. And like I said, the one in the Whitehall area, I tracked that from the woods right down to the road where it, and that's where I lost it.
If you can find a trackway to follow, you will see tree breaks, tree twists. You will see it. You will see it.
Trees are amazingly resilient, right? Yeah. And I love, and again, folks, you want to come back to it, feel free to screen grab this slide. That way you have a good, because this will talk about aging tree breaks. And with aging tree breaks, you'll have presence or absence of sap, its color. You'll see a tree that where the break had occurred, you'll see a discoloration in the area of the break. And that's because a tree's blood is the sap. And when it loses its sap, it becomes brittle and it breaks. Right? Now, I'm not saying that a Sasquatch may grab a tree and snap one off occasionally as a show of, as a display, as an aggression display. I've been in the woods too, where I've heard a tree get toppled, with some walking around it, and then you hear. Now, could it be a bear? Absolutely. But given the area in history of the Sasquatch sightings and lack of bear, you tend to say, well, it could be, but I mean, definitive, no. Maybe corroborative. It's something you put in the book and just star it. Yeah. But, as far as the tracking, and this is all about tracking, people can't tell.
That mom's got a good point. Said in Missouri, it was amazing to see trees look like they could work completely pushed over. There was a tree or limb breaks. A lot of what I was shown by so many people who say it's Bigfoot was actually completely natural, and that's
correct.
True.
Absolutely.
That's true. You see a lot of breaks that are completely natural.
And you'll see these pictures on the web of all these bent over trees, and you look where they are. Oh, well, they're in. No offense, Don. They're in Maine. They're in New Hampshire. They're in Minnesota. They're in Illinois. They're in Ohio. They're in Pennsylvania. They're in Montana. And what it is ice damage or snow load. And, because the snows will bend that tree, and especially in a freezing rainstorm, if the ice, if there's a cold snap is enough, say a front moves in, it's raining out. Then it turns to snow and ice. And then it drops to 10 degrees below zero. And that weight starts to go, it brings it down, right? And then that cold snap doesn't go away for a week, week and a half. Now that tree has kind of been formed to that.
Yeah.
Yes, you got to look for that twist.
Kaiju Ninja says, so you got to look for the twist. That's right. That's right. That's a definite sign that you're on to something. Yeah, in conjunction with a trackway, okay? Or some tracks or a sighting. If you can pick out some tree twists, you're on to something.
Right. And there's a great thing about snow accumulation tree breaks. Straight trunks do not accumulate much snow, making them less susceptible to snow-related breaks. So if you see where, a lot of people, look at this big tree or this tree and the top is snapped off. Well, it could be load from a what are you doing over there, Chris?
I'm rolling up a piece of paper as a visual aid.
Thank you. As an audible aid.
I'm opening up a battle of chips, a bag of chips.
Does.
But a regular limb break, like from snow or ice or something other, will just break down.
Yep.
It'll just drop down. When a Sasquatch tree twist, this thing will be like twisted and then
down.
Broken down.
Yep. Exactly.
So it's easy to spot the difference. I'm sorry about making all that racket, Steve.
No. I was wondering where it was going. Chris, can you just talk a little bit more about? I'm going to see if I can pull up that picture.
Okay. Yeah. So if you can get a trackway, or there's a sighting report that somebody recently saw one, and you go to that area where it was at, and then you find some tree twists up around, between 5 and 6 feet off the ground, or maybe even 7. Depending on how tall this thing was. If you find that twist, it'll be twisted and then broke. And it's evident. It's easy to see. It's not hard to spot. A regular limb break will just break down, just like I showed on the paper. When these things, for some reason, and I have no idea why, for some reason they twist the limb and it break it down. And it's easy to spot that twist.
There you go. So there it is, right up there.
Yeah. Very cool.
And there is a slight twist in that one too.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. A lot of time they'll be easier spot because they won't break off all the way to the ground. The bark on the outside of the limb will hold it in place. But
and there's one on the other side of the trail.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like I said, you can tell it's been twisted because they're just hanging by a thread.
Right. Yeah.
And in actuality,
too,
there was one. No, it's not a technique to attract more animals. If you're talking about these tree breaks, you're talking about hinge cutting. Never mind. Look at slide number 1 here. Was actually had pulled down a tree over the trail.
Yeah.
Because when these people went up the trail, this was not across the trail. So very interesting case there.
Those guys were credible too. They were credible.
Well, there's 5 of them.
Yeah.
And what happened, there was 3 girls that were leaving the little bonfire they had going on top of the hill. Yeah. And it was standing in the middle of the trail. And they ran back up the hill screaming. And the 2 gentlemen that were up there, one who was just returned back from the Gulf War, they walked down the trail. They escorted them out, and as they didn't notice anything. As they got to the bottom, they noticed that tree had been placed over the trail like that.
Right. Wasn't there then when they went up.
So they walked him across the street, up the road to a parking area where the gun club was, in a very remote area. Of course, this is 11 o'clock at night. There's no activity going on at the gun club, let alone anybody firing anything. And even in the daytime, I mean, it's like a rural gun club. So you may get some people shooting off maybe once or twice a week.
Yeah.
Mainly on the weekends during the mornings.
Right. Everybody else is to work.
Right.
Yeah.
So the two boys decided to go walk. The two 20-plus-year-olds, they were like in their early 20s. And they go back up the hill, and then they spot one crouched over to the side, kind of crouched down. It was 5 foot tall, crouched down. And they had caught it out of the corner of their eye, and they looked at you see that thing? You're like, yeah, and it was kind of just
right.
So they turned around and they booked it out of there. And that guy would not go back up the hill.
I don't blame him.
So that's when I found where they had set it to crouch down. You know, there's this going out of the area. Here's all these tree breaks. And the scary thing is that where it had walked down was not far from the parking lot to the Rod and Gun Club. Yeah. So whatever it was breaking down there kind of followed them down a little bit. So
that was an interesting case.
Mm-hmm.
Kaiju Ninja says, I got to wonder when they do their wood knocking, could that cause a tree to fall over? I don't think
so. But it wouldn't sound like a wood knock. Usually when you hit that wood on wood, that nice resounding pop. And otherwise you hear.
Yeah, I went back.
And the reason why I say that is I've taken, a club or a bat or a pot. I use a pot sometimes. Right. A good aluminum pot, you bang that against a tree because of with the back side of it, with the hollow side out, that right. will resonate to a resounding tree knock. Pop, pop. Right. But if you take that and hit it against a dead tree, that'll fall over. Or, you hit it against a dead tree, you don't get that resounding, you get a thud. Right. Because there's no life in that tree to give it that hollowness. It's all dead and crumbling inside.
Well, in 2010, I was out with another investigator, and we had 2 trees come down while we were in this area. This was a hot area. There was a lot of activity going on there. And we had 2 trees come down in the maybe within a 5-minute period. So we left the area. The next day I went back for a follow-up. I found both of those trees. They were around 125 yards from where we had been standing. And they were down in opposite directions. And both of them had been not uprooted, but the roots had been pulled over out of the ground. So you could see the root ball on the bottom of the tree, like something had grabbed it and pulled it over, or, as I theorized before, that one of them had climbed and used his weight to topple the tree over. But, there wasn't any beat marks on it or anything. I mean, can you imagine if you leave an axe out there in the wood, they would probably chop down all the trees. Something to do. There was a lot of bark missing from that tree too. That was freshly peeled off. I think they ate that.
Well, if you're still out there, like the whole medulla thing, that's, like I said, that's really subjective. I mean, unless you have a decent sample of proven Sasquatch hair, which we don't, because you can't even prove Sasquatch exist right now. So that's why hair is kind of a slippery slope. As far as the medulla, no medulla, anything like that. I think it was more interesting to look at the statistics of what the witnesses had seen than that. So
we got some questions that's from the beginning of the show here, Steve. Let me put some of these up here. Kaiju Ninja said, wait, they eat nettles? Well,
I don't know what they eat.
Don't know. Humans do. Humans eat bull nettles. I've had some before. And, you just boil them up. But I don't know if they could eat them green, especially, with the little stickers on there. If those aren't soft, those would be pretty rough. But I suppose they could eat about anything that grows wild. They would. They would, yeah. Let's see. Kaiser Soze says, do either of you gentlemen know of a credible investigator in the eastern Pennsylvania, western New Jersey area?
Sean Forker. He is in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And Mrs. Trackway says, I don't get the funky smell. From an evolutionary standpoint, to incite fear, it would have to be voluntary if you trust all the witnesses who don't report a smell.
Well, that's a great point, but
Yeah,
but here's the logical thing. Either one, there's an olfactory glands underneath their arms, or like a gorilla. A gorilla has olfactory glands, and when it's under stress, it will release a very musky, stinky odor.
Yes.
Conversely, if the creature's hygiene is not necessarily up to snuff, think about it. They're urinating, they're
Yes.
depositing fecal matter, they're laying on the ground. Then they have sweat because they're a primate. Primates sweat. They don't pant. We've never seen a Bigfoot go, right? Because another difference, and that's another difference of why a Bigfoot doesn't shed, is because it has pores and skin and it sweats like we do, because we've never seen a Bigfoot panting, really, like with its tongue sticking out, because the animals that have fur, when they get really hot, like a bear or a dog or even a cat will pant too. When they get really hot, they use their tongues to cool down their body. That the cool air going into their lungs and into their mouths cools them down. That's how they ventilate. They don't have sweat glands.
And some of the witnesses reported a smell, reported an odor, and other witnesses reported no odor. And
I have smelled one.
I can attest to that fact. Sometimes you can get an odor on one. Sometimes they have no odor. And it may just depend on whether the wind's blowing one way or another too.
I don't think so, because man, that smell was like bang, like holy crap.
Right.
And at the time, it was the wind wasn't blowing. In fact, the wind didn't blow until after it had left.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, what the hell? And then the two I had seen, I mean, we found the Ford-Ann cast after we found the trackway and everything. And the two I had observed, I didn't smell a thing.
Right. So there's that decomposing body, rotten flesh smell that is so strong it will initiate the gag reflex of anybody that smells it.
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about it, because right now we don't have time to dig too much. We're just about done. But just look up the term apocrine glands, APOCRINE gland, and that should tell you a little more. So we do have primates that have these glands that emit a smell, and a stink.
Yeah.
So
you'll get that really stinky dead odor. Sometimes you'll get that wet dog musky
skunky
smell,
odor,
swampy smell. Yeah. Let's see, Kaiju Ninja.
Well, we haven't even got.
Kaiju Ninja says, why do you think sometimes we find one print instead of a trackway?
Substrate, not being a professional tracker and not learning how to find the partial tracks. Because if something is laying down a full track, it doesn't mean the next step's going to be a full track. It may be a partial.
Right.
And like when I followed that thing due to the breaks in the brush, I didn't find any tracks, but I found a lot of impressions.
Yeah.
Some were full size, but there was no definitive shape. So sometimes it depends on the substrate.
And they can change how their foot depends on how they're walking, what kind of track they'll leave.
Right. And let's say they're leaving partial prints and it makes a turn, you may miss it.
Mm-hmm.
So, common misinformation about Bigfoot. We're going to go real quick here.
Okay.
Because we got literally 4 minutes left to show.
Okay,
We're gonna run a little over tonight. So, the big thing, common misinformation about Bigfoot, that, here's my number one pet peeve, is that Bigfoot can see trail cameras because they can see the IR. Well, number one, trail cameras do not constantly emit infrared light. They only emit the infrared light when the camera is triggered.
Right.
So that is a complete myth and it's debunked by science and mechanics of how these cameras are built. Now, maybe do they hear maybe an ultrasonic or type of whir from the electronics? Maybe, but here's the thing: I have a problem with that. Is that if the camera is in a passive mode, it's not really emitting anything. It doesn't emit it until it's time to take the picture.
Right.
So that's another mechanical thing that's not completely.
Primates are not really known for their sense of smell or hearing either.
Now, here's a very interesting question: burying their dead. And I feel they do not, because they would have unearthed some remains over the past 300 years. You know, we have such extensive construction here in the United States. Now you say, well, where? Listen, you know, in the 1700s, cities weren't there. We dug all those up, and we're still constantly digging. We're still creating new areas. We're still, I mean, even in my own area, that very well could be the meatloaf. So to me, burying bones and burying dead is meant for the purpose of preserving the bones or preventing scavengers from taking the bones. And that's why Homo erectus started doing that. They didn't want they didn't want to leave a body out there and have a saber-toothed tiger come over in there and grab the body and drag it off to eat it. So that's why they started burying their dead, and eventually it became a ritual, you know. And you know, if Sasquatch buried their dead, we'd be finding their bones. We'd be digging up bodies. We would be finding patches of hair in the ground. We would see the fresh unearthed dirt. Right? They got to dig. How are they digging these holes? You know, they would have to dig them pretty deep for us not to find them. Right? So we don't have that. The fact is that when Homo erectus and Homo sapiens dig their graves, a lot of times we have to use backhoes now. Homo erectus, they didn't bury their dead too deep. But as Homo sapiens, we bury them deep. Why? Because of soil erosion, because of rain, because of all that. Not only do we have predators that might take them, but we may have, rain and erosion that will make these bodies come up to surface. And there's been some 1800 cemeteries that weren't, dug to par, which is 6 feet at least, that where the bodies or coffins have popped back up. So the reason why, and a lot of times too, if you think about it, what if a Sasquatch dies in the wintertime? How the hell are they digging up that frozen soil in January or February of the month? Right. So it makes no sense because they're not using tools. We know they don't use complicated tools. What are they using? A rock? It's going to take a lot of rock digging to get a substantial hole to put a 7-foot, 660-pound creature into it. And then not somebody stumble upon a mound or,
That's the thing. Yeah. It boils down to speculation. That's one of the reasons I don't like to get into how do they dispose of their dead.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And the biggest fact is that if they bury their dead, some contractor somewhere, some highway crew, somebody putting in water lines, they would have found their bones. But anyway, with that, one other quick fact is that based on extrapolation of from human strength, Sasquatch is estimated, and this is again data based upon height, weight, and from weightlifting statistics by weightlifters, that's capable of lifting at least 1,300 pounds. And that makes a lot of sense because in the very first sightings that started to make the waves back in 1958, the whole logging crew with Jerry Crew and folks, they were reporting that 50-gallon drums were being tossed around. Yeah. So that kind of makes a lot of sense. But anyway,
full drums.
Right. Dr. Fahrenbach suggested that that there's a substantial population of Sasquatch, possibly in the low thousands across the United States. And that's again based on using statistics of other animals that exist in the wild. So based upon data sets where they've been reported sightings. So take that for what it's worth. Again, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway,
another speculation.
Right.
But based on evidence, though, based on information.
Yep. Well, anyway, that's our show for tonight. Chris, you want to take us out?
Okay, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We appreciate you guys spending your Sunday evening with us. And, these last Wednesday and Friday, it's like we're almost living together now. But thank you guys. We appreciate you. And, you guys make the show. You're the best Bigfoot audience we could ever hope for. And, we're pleased, honored, and thrilled to have you spend time with us and hang out with us. If it's the first time watching, make sure you punch the subscribe button, punch the like button on the way out if you hadn't already. And we really appreciate you guys. Steve.
And folks, behalf on me and Chris, we want to wish everybody a happy, healthy, and safe week. We will be back this Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, with an all-new Friday Night Bigfoot show. And unless, of course, something, the fall floors out of the friggin' Bigfoot world again this week.
We may go live any minute. You never know.
3 o'clock in the morning. No, I'm not calling Chris at 3. It can wait. It can wait till the evening. Sorry. But anyway, we will catch everybody next Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Everybody have a great, safe, healthy week. God bless. And of course, keep on squatching. We'll see you all in a little bit.
We thank you for being here with us on Squatch-D TV. If you haven't taken the time yet, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And oh yes, hit that notification bell too. We don't want you to miss anything. If you really like our content, you should consider becoming a member. And it's really inexpensive and a great way to support not only the show, but honest Bigfoot research. Everyone have a great week. Be safe and God bless. We will see you all here next time on Squatch-D TV. Keep on squatching.